Bismillah. Yeah, Abdul Fattah, the mic is not working. Bismillah. Hey, Abdul Fattah. بسم الله الحمد لله ثناء لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So raise your hand, Abdul Fattah, until the mic is not working. طيب, after praising Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and sending salutations upon our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, we'll proceed. طيب, last week we covered a number of things in the seerah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. We started from the marriage of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to Khadija bint Khuwaylid. And we spoke about the importance of that marriage and that effect that he had on the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. It's not working. It's not there. طيب. بسم الله الحمد لله والثناء لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. طيب. Last week we covered a number of things in the seerah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And these matters that we covered, we started from the marriage of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to Khadija bint Khuwaylid radiyallahu anha wa radaha. And we spoke about the importance of that marriage. How old was the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when he got married to Khadija? 25 years old. He got married to Khadija radiyallahu anha wa radaha. And then we spoke about after that the Prophet ﷺ participating in the rebuilding of the Kaaba at the age of 35, and how he stopped Quraish from fighting one another when they differed who was going to place the black stone in the Kaaba. And then we spoke about also the Prophet ﷺ prior to prophethood, how it was made beloved to him seclusion, and he used to go to Ghar Hira and worship Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala there for a number of days, secluding himself from Quraish and what they used to engage in and their shirk. And then we discussed what happened to the Messenger alayhi salatu salam when he received the revelation in the mountain, in the cave from Jibreel alayhi salam, and how he sallallahu alayhi wasallam he reacted. And then he went back to his wife Khadija radiyallahu anha wa ardaha, and what she said to him. She said that a man who has these qualities, that keeps ties with the king, who helps those who are in need, who aids just causes, supports just causes, who honors the guest, someone who has these qualities, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala will never disgrace him. And then she took the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to Waraqah ibn Nawfal, who told the Prophet alayhi salatu salam what had happened, and that was Jibreel alayhi salam who revealed the revelation to him. And that if he was a young man, he would support him and stand by him when his people exile him and fight against him. And then we also spoke about the Prophet alayhi salatu salam when he received the revelation that a number of days after that, he was told to call to Allah when Surah Al-Muddathir was revealed to him. He was told, "Qum fa'andir," arise and warn. So we started calling people in secret. So we were in the period where the da'wah was in secret. The da'wah in Mecca was secret for the first 3 years. The first 3 years, it was completely secret. A number of people embraced Islam at that time. We mentioned the first Muslims, Khadija radiallahu anha, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu arda, Zayd ibn Harith radiallahu anhu, and also we have Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu arda. And then there was others who followed them, who were from the Sabiqeen, and we mentioned their names as well. But all these people who embraced Islam, it was people approaching them on an individual basis and keeping it a secret, not letting anyone know about this so that it doesn't cause any harm to the Messenger ﷺ and the companions as well. So this actually had great importance. The Prophet ﷺ, him keeping it secret at the time, it was important for the believers at the time because they needed time to build the Muslims, to focus on teaching the Muslims and educating them. There was no time for surah, opposition, fighting, because that's going to distract the Prophet ﷺ from the main purpose, which is to educate the Sahaba, to nurture them upon the correct creed, and also nurture them to be Rabbaniyun, those who serve Allah and live for Allah Ta'ala. For 3 years, the Messenger ﷺ, he did that. There are a number of cars that are blocking. There's a car that's an Audi LR22ZHP. If that's your car, please move it, inshallah. So what happened? The Prophet ﷺ, in those 3 years, he was building the Sahaba in terms of their aqidah, correcting their creed, teaching them about Allah Ta'ala. All the Quran that was coming down in Mecca, it was talking about Allah, the greatness of Allah, the attributes of Allah, the names of Allah Ta'ala, worshipping Allah alone, relying upon Allah alone, serving Allah Ta'ala, being sincere to Him. And this had a great effect on the nufus of the Sahaba themselves. It had a great effect on them. Because of all this, when eventually the da'wah became public and the Prophet ﷺ started calling in public, the Sahaba were ready to endure whatever was to happen. They were able to face all the consequences that were to happen because they had been nurtured and taught that they are living for Allah Ta'ala, and Allah has prepared something great in the hereafter. So the Prophet ﷺ, he carried on and he chose a place to do his da'wah at that time in secret. This place was known as Darul Arqam ibn Abi Arqam. He chose Darul Arqam ibn Abi Arqam. Now Darul Arqam, it was a very strategic place that the Prophet ﷺ, he chose, the house of Arqam ibn Abi Arqam. Why did he choose it? There were a number of reasons. Number one, Arqam ibn Abi Arqam at the time was only 16 years old. So Quraish would never suspect that a 16-year-old's house would be the center of the da'wah. That was number one. The second reason why the Prophet ﷺ, he chose Darul Arqam ibn Abi Arqam, it is because the house of Al-Arqam, it is next to Mount Safa. His house was next to Mount Safa. Now Mount Safa, by it was very busy. There will always be people there. So nobody would actually notice people coming in and out because of how populated and busy that place was, the area was. That was the second reason. The third reason why the Prophet ﷺ, he chose Darul Arqam ibn Abi Arqam radiyallahu anhu arda, it is because Arqam was from Bani Makhzum. Bani Makhzum, they were the clan who were the rivals of Bani Hashim. So nobody will suspect that the Prophet ﷺ would choose the house of his rivals. Right? So that was the next reason. Also, the other reason why the Prophet ﷺ chose the house of Arqam ibn Abi Arqam, it is that the Islam of Arqam at the time was not known. Nobody knew that he was Muslim. Therefore, no one will suspect his home. Now, so that is why Allah Tabarak or the Prophet ﷺ chose that place. That became the Jami'ah, the university where the Prophet ﷺ, he produced the Sahaba. That is where the Quran was taught to them. That's where they prayed together. They came in secret, they came to the Prophet ﷺ, this great leader, where they observed everything that he did ﷺ. He ﷺ would be receiving the Quran, and when he receives the Quran, the Sahaba will come to Darul Arqam and they would listen to this Quran, they would memorize it, and then they would share it with each other. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, this Quran, when it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ at that time, they took everything on board and they implemented it immediately. And this is one of the things that made them from the great generation, that they were extremely hasty and they rushed towards implementing what Allah revealed to the Prophet ﷺ. And therefore, because these teachings were deep-rooted in their hearts, that there's another car, huh? عبد الفتاح الله يهديك. طيب, this car is WR10PWO. That's your car. Please move it as well. Jazakallah khair. I don't want to keep announcing cars, so please, if you parked inappropriately, please move your car. طيب, so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam, because these teachings that he taught the Sahaba, that they completely accepted, that is what allowed them, when the da'wah became public, that they were willing to do anything for the religion of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. Because they had that complete tawakkul ala Allah, reliance upon Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. And all the ayat that were revealed at that time were teaching in those matters. You can summarize that period in the ayah that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said in Surah Al-Kahf, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا. You can summarize that period with this ayah, where the Prophet ﷺ is said to him, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ, be patient, O Muhammad ﷺ, with those who are calling upon their Lord day and night, and they are seeking His face, i.e. sincerely calling upon Allah. And do not turn away from them. Are you seeking the adornments of this world? And do not obey those that we have made their hearts heedless from our remembrance, and they follow their desires. In this ayah, we learn a number of things. Number one, Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is saying as-sabr, talking about being patient. And patience was a very important matter, especially in this period of time. As-sabr. Allah says, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ, be patient, O Muhammad alayhi salatu salam. Where Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is telling him that you need to be patient, and also the Sahaba need to be patient. And they need to be patient with each other's company. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet alayhi salatu, be patient with the Sahaba who are constantly going to be asking you questions. Be patient with the wrong things that they're going to do that you need to correct. Be patient with teaching them. Be forbearing with them, and so on. And also Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is instructing the companions and everyone else that they need to be patient with this good company that they have in Darul Arqam, that they surround themselves with those righteous people, because that is what is going to help them overcome the difficulties that they're going to face. And in the ayah also, Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, he mentions ad-du'a, yad'una rabbahum, that they call upon on their Lord, teaching us that dua in this period, it is extremely essential. And Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is instilling in the hearts of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum that we need to constantly call upon Allah and ask Allah for help and ask Allah for assistance, and everything that we need, we request it from Allah tabarak wa ta'ala sincerely. And then you have also in this ayah ikhlas, the importance of sincerity in this period. This is another factor that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala is teaching them. يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ, they are calling upon Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah says, يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ, they are seeking His face, and sincerely. Sincerity, it is what allows you to be steadfast. Sincerity, it is what actually motivates you to serve the religion of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. Because when you're sincere, you're seeking the reward of Allah, the face of Allah, the pleasure of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. And when you know Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, nothing else in this world matters. And the more sincere you are, the more Allah will put barakah in what you do. And that's exactly what happened with the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Yani they were saying with their actions, إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ أَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. That's my prayers, my sacrifice, my life, my death. It is for Allah, the Lord of the universe. Every part of it is for Allah Azza wa Jal. لا شريك له, there are no partners with Him. وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ, and I was commanded with that. وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. يعني حركاتي وسكناتي, my movements, and when I'm still, they are all for Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. أقوالي وأفعالي, my statements and my actions, they are for Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. It is as if the Sahaba were saying that with their actions. And we're going to see examples of that inshaAllah ta'ala. And then we have also in the ayah, Allah says, وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ, do not turn away from them, i.e. تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ, are you seeking the pleasures of this world, the adornments of this world? This is referring to at-tabat, steadfastness, being firm. Being firm. And Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He also mentions a similar matter in another ayah, which also can sum up how the Sahaba were in this period of time. Where Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He says, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. From the believers, Amen. And Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is telling us here that these men amongst Sahaba were true men. They are men from the believers who were truthful in their covenant with Allah, i.e. they were sincere in their promise to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Amongst them are those who are passed away, and amongst them are those who are waiting, وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا, and they were steadfast, they were firm. Yani that's manhood, that rujuda that they had, it is what kept them going. Because the Arabs, their rujuda was something very important to them. And then Islam came and taught them what true manhood was and what it means to be a true man. So then they adopted that and they lived by that, and that's what made them the greatest leaders. Now, so the Prophet ﷺ, in that period, for 3 years, he did that, he focused on that. And then he ﷺ, after that, he was commanded by Allah Ta'ala to call publicly. After 3 years of calling secretly, and a number of people have embraced Islam in secret. And Quraish, majority of Quraish are not aware of this da'wah. They're not aware of it. Then Allah Ta'ala says to the Prophet ﷺ, فَاصْدَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. O Muhammad, فَاصْدَعْ, advocate what you are commanded publicly. وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, and turn away from the mushrikeen. Prior to that, Allah revealed, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, warn your close kin. So when this ayah was revealed, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ, warn your close kin, your relatives, the Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? He gathered his relatives, the closest relatives, his uncles, his cousins, so on, he gathered them all. And then he called them to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. And when he called them to Allah Azza wa Jal, all of his uncles, they listened to him, except one who rejected immediately the message. Who do you think that was? Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab, he said, what you have come with, we are never going to accept it. And then he left it at that. Shortly after that, Allah wrote to the Prophet ﷺ, فَاصْدَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرْ, proclaim and advocate religion publicly. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he went on top of Mount Safa. And then he called upon all the different clans amongst Quraysh, name by name. And Quraysh all came running to the Prophet ﷺ because they know him as what? As-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful one, the trustworthy one. If he's calling them, it must be something of great importance. Because they all trusted the Prophet ﷺ. He had that status amongst them. So they all came out. Even those who couldn't come, they sent someone to go listen on their behalf, to bring back information for them. Because they felt how important it was. So they came to the Prophet ﷺ, and then he ﷺ said to them, Ya ma'shara Quraish, if I said to you that there's an army behind this valley coming to attack you, would you believe me? They all responded, of course we believe you. You are as-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful one, trustworthy one. مَا جَرَّبْنَا عَلَيْكَ كَذِبًا, we have never ever found you to have lied, you never have lied. So look, the Prophet ﷺ starting like this is very important. He's reminding them of his position amongst his people, that he has never lied. All these years, is now 43 years of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, never ever lied, never ever cheated anyone, never deceived anyone. And they all unanimously agreed upon that. That was important. And then after they all agreed upon that, then he said to them that I am a warner from Allah Ta'ala, warning you of the punishment of Allah, the painful punishment of Allah. As soon as he said that, Abu Lahab was the first one to speak. And then he said, تَبًّا لَكَ تَبًّا لَكَ سَائِرَ الْيَوْمِ أَلِهَذَا جَمَعْتَنَا. He said, may you perish. Did you gather us for this? After Abu Lahab said that, the Prophet ﷺ did not respond. He didn't say anything back to his uncle. And there's hikmah, wisdom behind that. That as a da'iyah, one who's calling to Allah Ta'ala, you must be wise in your approach. If the Prophet ﷺ was to respond to his uncle, that would have damaged the da'wah. it would have damaged his character. They would have said that look at him, he's speaking back to his uncle, his elder. And that would have had Quraish, they would use it as an excuse to reject the da'wah itself. To say that someone with that character, how can he be with the Messenger of Allah Ta'ala? Nothing ever tarnished the character of the Prophet. He never allowed that to happen. Allah protected him from that. Even that situation where normally someone, when he knows he's upon the truth, what will he do? He will respond. He never responded. And Allah Ta'ala responded on behalf of the Prophet where Allah Ta'ala revealed Surah Al-Masad, responding to Abu Lahab. تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب سيصلى نارا ذات لهب وامرأته حمالة الحطب في جيدها حبل من مسد. Allah said, تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب, that the hands of Abu Lahab are going to perish, i.e. he's going to perish in hellfire. ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب, his wealth and what he earned and his offspring and so on are not going to avail him, they're not going to benefit him, they're not going to protect him from the punishment of Allah. سيصلى نارا ذات لهب, he's going to be thrown into a fire ذات لهب, that has a lahab, a blaze, fire, blaze. Now Allah Ta'ala mocked him and ridiculed him with the name that he was proud of, his kunya, Abu Lahab. Why is that? What was the name of Abu Lahab? Does anyone know his actual name? Any idea? No. Abdul Uzza. His name was Abdul Uzza. Al-Uzza is one of the idols of Quraish. Allah Ta'ala didn't mention his name in the Quran because Allah Ta'ala will never affirm shirk in the Quran. Polytheism. Right? That's number one. Secondly, Allah Ta'ala, he mentioned his kunya because the kunya to the Arabs is their favorite name. It's the most beloved name to them. Why was he called Abu Lahab? Lahab means the blaze of the fire. It is because Abu Lahab, he had some redness on his cheeks, and the Arabs, they saw that as a sign of being handsome. So it was a form of praise for him. But Allah Ta'ala said about him, سَيَصْلَى نَارًا ذَاتَ لَهَبٍ, he'll be thrown into a fire that has a blaze. وَامْرَأَتُهُ, and his wife as well. His wife, her name was Jameel, because she helped her husband in harming the Prophet ﷺ. Rather, sometimes she did worse things than her husband. She would leave thorns outside the house of the Prophet ﷺ. She would stone the Prophet ﷺ when she would see him. She would insult the Prophet ﷺ, and so on. Right? So Allah Ta'ala promised that these two individuals, they are going to end up in the fire. These verses, were they revealed after Abu Lahab and Jameel died, or whilst they were alive? Whilst they were alive. Did they hear these verses? Yes, they heard it. These verses in Surah Al-Masad, they indicate the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ's message. Because Abu Lahab could have easily turned around, his wife could have easily turned around and said that I'm Muslim now and the Quran is false. They could have said that, right? They could have even lied and said that I'm Muslim. They could have pretended. But that never happened. They died upon their disbelief. Because someone who is not truthful will never ever risk his message by saying something he can't guarantee. He can't control others. He can't control their reaction. Right? So him saying that you're destined for the hellfire and you're not going to believe, it is not something the Prophet ﷺ can say by himself. He has to have revelation. It has to be divine. So this indicates the truthfulness of the Prophet ﷺ in conveying this Quran and the message of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Now, so when the Prophet ﷺ, he was calling to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in Mecca publicly, you know what Abu Lahab would do? Abu Lahab would follow around the Prophet ﷺ, and he would throw stones at him, and he would say, لا تطيعوه. He would say to the people, don't obey him. فإنه كذاب. For verily he's a liar. Imagine your own uncle doing that. You know Abu Lahab, he was the next door neighbor of the Prophet ﷺ. He lived right next door to the Prophet ﷺ. So what did he do? When the Prophet ﷺ, he started his da'wah publicly, the first thing that Abu Lahab did is his two sons. They were married to the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ, Ruqayya and Kalthum. He got his two sons to divorce the Prophet ﷺ daughters, to harm the Prophet ﷺ. That's the first thing he did. And then they would leave dirt and they would leave thorns outside the house of the Prophet ﷺ regularly, him and his wife. And he would insult the Prophet ﷺ publicly. The rest of Quraysh would not do that. They would not harm the Prophet ﷺ, but Abu Lahab would do so because he was his own uncle. Nobody could stop him. Whereas the rest of Quraysh, they were afraid of Bani Hashim. what Bani Hashim are going to do when they protect the Prophet ﷺ. So nobody would harm him physically. But Abu Lahab would do that. He was the first to do that. Harm the Prophet ﷺ physically. And his wife, Jameel, she would do the same. On top of that, when these verses of Surah Al-Masad were revealed, she looked for the Prophet ﷺ when she heard these ayat. And she had a rock in her hand. She wanted to throw it to the Prophet ﷺ when she sees him. So she went to the masjid, and the Prophet ﷺ was sitting there with Abu Bakr. When she went there, she saw Abu Bakr, but she could not see the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ was hidden from her. She was not able to see him, even though he was sitting right there, right in front of her. So then she asked Abu Bakr, "Where's your companion? I heard that he's insulting us with his poetry." That's what she said. She's calling the Quran poetry. And then Abu Bakr, he was thinking, what's going on? Yani? He's sitting right next to me. Why can't she see him? So he didn't respond to her. And he said that you know that this is not poetry. You truly know that it's not poetry. And then she said that I'm a poet as well. I can respond to his hijab, him insulting me with his poetry. I can respond to that as well. And she said, if I see him, I'm going to throw this rock at him. I'm going to open his head with this rock, crack it open. That's what she said. And then she said, مذمم عصينا ودينه قلينا وأمره أبينا. She said, مذمم. Mudhammam is the opposite of Muhammad. It means the dispraised one. She said, مذمم, the dispraised one, عصينا, we have disobeyed him. وَدِينُهُ قَلَيْنَا, and his religion we have abandoned it. وَأَمْرُهُ أَبَيْنَا, and as for his command we have refused it. And then she left in rage after that. So then Abu Bakr, he said, Ya Rasulullah, you're sitting right next to me, why couldn't she see you? The Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah Ta'ala has veiled her eyes from being able to see me. And then the Prophet ﷺ would become very happy because she would go around insulting mudhammam, saying mudhammam. The Prophet ﷺ would become happy and would say that Alhamdulillah, that Allah Ta'ala has protected me, that they are insulting and they are ridiculing mudhammam, and I'm Muhammad. Right? They insulted some guy called mudhammam, I'm Muhammad. Right? That's how the Prophet ﷺ would respond. Alayhi salatu wassalam. So during that period, the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, they went through a lot of difficulties. And the difficulties that they went through, it wasn't all of them, because the majority of the Sahaba at the beginning of the Dawah that was public, they were hiding their Islam. There was only a handful of people that their Islam was known. And that was, of course, the Prophet ﷺ and his household. Their Islam was known. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his Islam was known. He made it clear that he was Muslim. Also, we have a number of people who are from the weak amongst the Sahaba. Bilal ibn Rabah was from the first people that his Islam was known. Suhayb al-Rumi, his Islam was known. Al-Miqdad ibn Aswad, his Islam was known. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, his Islam was also known early. So all of these Sahaba, the majority of them that we just mentioned, they are amongst the weak people in that society in Quraish. What do you mean by weak people? That they had no one to protect them. They had no tribe, no clan to protect them. So their life was in danger. But look at the courage and the bravery of these companions they had. That they didn't fear anything. And they made it sure that their Islam was known. And they made it public. But then Quraish, they tried a number of things to stop this da'wah. They have a number of different strategies. The first strategy, it was to go to Abu Talib. They went to Abu Talib to get Abu Talib to stop the Prophet ﷺ, because they can't stop the Prophet ﷺ themselves. So they spoke to Abu Talib and they told him, Ya Abu Talib, that your son, your nephew, the Prophet ﷺ, قَدْ سَفَّهَ أَحْلَامَنَا, that he has وَعَابَ آلِهَتَنَا, that he has insulted our gods and our religion. And he has made us seem like that we are foolish and that we do not comprehend things. And he has divided us, disunited our people. Stop your nephew from what he's doing. That's what they said to Abu Talib. All the leaders of Quraysh, the most senior men. Amr ibn Hisham, yani Abu Jahl, he went. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, he went. Al-Walid ibn Mughira, he went. Al-As ibn Wa'il al-Sahmi, he also went. They all went to Abu Talib together as a group to show them that they all united in their stance, that they want him to stop his nephew. Abu Talib, he was very polite to them when they first spoke to him. He was very polite. And he made it seem like that he was going to address the Prophet ﷺ and trying to convince him to do something else. Because as we know, Abu Talib at the moment, he's a mushrik, right? So he feels some sympathy for them, Quraish. He tries to understand where they're coming from. And at the same time, he doesn't want any harm to come to his nephew. He wants to protect him, right? So he's conflicted. So he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, oh my son. He said, you've seen your relatives, what they are saying, and the effect of what you're calling to. He said, oh my nephew, if only you stopped it, and you tried to negotiate with them and change your approach. So then the Prophet ﷺ, when he heard Abu Talib saying that, he was extremely upset by that. He was extremely upset by that. Rather, he felt like that Abu Talib was going to abandon the Prophet ﷺ and leave him and no longer protect him. So the Prophet ﷺ became very emotional. And he walked away from Abu Talib. And before he walked away, he said to him, Ya Am, O my uncle, Wallahi, I swear by Allah, if they were to place the sun in my right and the moon in my left, and if they were to give me everything in this universe, I will not leave this religion, I will not abandon it, this matter. Either I become victorious or I die for this cause, there's no other option. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. So then when Abu Talib saw how emotional the Prophet ﷺ became and how he responded, Abu Talib, he reassured the Prophet ﷺ that he's not going to abandon him and that he's going to stand by him. And they say that he said lines of poetry. They say that he said at this time, some of the ulama of SEERAH, and others say that he said it another time. Regardless, he said, وَاللَّهِ لَيَصِلُ إِلَيْكَ بِجَمْعِهِمْ حَتَّى أُوَسَّدَ فِي التُّرَابِ دَفِينَ فاصدع بأمرك ما عليك غضاضة وأبشر بذاك وقر منك عيونا ودعوتني وزعمت أنك ناصحي ولقد صدقت وكنت قبل أمينا وعرضت دينا قد علمت بأنه من خير أديان البرية دينا لولا الملامة أو حذار مسبة لوجدتني سمحا بذاك يقينا. He said that I swear by Allah, Abu Talib is saying this. He says, I swear by Allah, Ya Muhammad, they shall not come near you or harm you in any way as long as I'm alive, no matter how many they are in number. No one shall harm you. Until I'm buried in the ground, no one's going to harm you. فَاصْدَعْ بِأَمْرِكَ, advocate your religion, proclaim it, spread it. مَا عَلَيْكَ غَضَاضَةٌ, you have nothing to be ashamed of. And you're only going to see that which pleases you. And then he says, وَدَعَوْتَنِي, you have called me, O Muhammad. Yani the Prophet ﷺ is saying, you called me to Islam, Abu Talib said. وَزَعَمْتَ أَنَّكَ نَاصِحِي, and you have informed me that you are one who sincerely calling me to Allah. And you are always a truthful one and a trustworthy one. You are always known as that. And then he says, you have presented a religion. قَدْ عَلِمْتُ بِأَنَّهُ, I know it is the best religion of mankind. After here, you think Abu Talib is about to embrace Islam after this, right? And then he says, if it wasn't me being afraid of what Quraish are going to say about me, or them insulting me, or shaming me, I would have accepted religion. But I don't want to say he left the religion of his forefathers, and so on. The only reason Abu Talib didn't embrace Islam, it is because of what people would say about him, what Quraish would say about him, unfortunately. Now, so that is the first approach that Quraish took, to try to convince Abu Talib to stop the Prophet ﷺ. They tried that twice. The first time was what I just mentioned. The second time they came to Abu Talib, when they got frustrated with the da'wah and how it was spreading, they said to him, they brought to him Amara ibn al-Walid, who was the son of al-Walid al-Mughira, who was a young man at the time. They said, Ya Abu Talib, this is Amara ibn al-Walid. He's from the most handsome young men of Quraish, from an extremely noble family. Take him and take him as a son and surrender to us Muhammad, and then we'll kill Muhammad. Abu Talib said, this is the worst bargain that you can ever give anyone. I'm never going to accept that. Yani you're saying that you want me to raise your son for you and you kill my son? Have you lost your minds? That's what he said to them. And then some of them came to Abu Talib and they said to him, Ya Abu Talib, قَدْ أَنْصَفَكَ الْقَوْمِ. The people, your people, they were just, they were fair in what they presented to you. Right? They are trying to make it seem like that he's the one being ridiculous and he's the one who's being unreasonable and that they are being very reasonable. They are trying to make it seem like that by all gang up on him. But then he said that I'm never going to accept that no matter what. Never going to surrender my son to you. So the Prophet ﷺ carried on his da'wah. So the Prophet ﷺ, because of the protection of Abu Talib and his status and so on, Quraish, they would not try to harm him. But then they tried something else. This is the second strategy that they tried. They said that we are going to punish and torture all those who are the weak amongst the Muslims. We're going to torture them to stop this da'wah. If we can't harm Muhammad ﷺ, we're going to harm those Sahaba who have embraced Islam to send the message. First of all, to scare others from embracing Islam, and to also make these people leave Islam, and to also get the Prophet ﷺ to stop his da'wah when he sees what's happening to his companions. So every single tribe and clan, they said that their relatives, or those who are under their protection, or those who they're responsible for, they're going to punish them. So you have Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, what happened to him? Abu Bakr, he was from those who were protected, he wasn't tortured. But Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, one day, he was with the Prophet alayhi salatu salam. And then he said to the Prophet alayhi salam, Ya Rasulullah, why do we keep hiding our faith? Why do we address them all publicly? So the Prophet alayhi salam told Abu Bakr, now is not the time, Ya Abu Bakr. It's not the right time. The time will come. Abu Bakr insisted. And then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he got up and he stood in front of all Quraish. And he started calling to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala. He was the first khatib, the first person who delivered the sermon in Islam after the Messenger alayhi salatu salam. And then Quraish, when they heard him speaking, they all rushed towards him, especially Utbah ibn Rabi'ah. And Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, he tackled Abu Bakr. And he got him on the ground. And he beat him until the people thought Abu Bakr is dead. Then his people, who were known as Banu Taym, they came to rescue Abu Bakr. And they carried him with a garment. They carried him to his house. They took him to his mother. And they all were under the impression that Abu Bakr is dead. And they all threatened Utbah, because Utbah was from a different clan. They said, if he's dead, your life is at risk, that we're going to kill you, Ya Utbah. That's what they said to him. Abu Bakr is taken home. He's unconscious for a while. And then his mother, she's nursing him. And she's taking care of him. And then he wakes up. When he wakes up, radiallahu anhu, we ask one question. He says, مَا فَعَلَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ? What happened to the Messenger of Allah? They said to him, you are hurt. You almost died. Worry about yourself at the moment. His mother, al-Khair, she's not Muslim at the time. And then Abu Bakr, he says, لا, مَا فَعَلَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ? What happened to the Messenger of Allah? Is he okay? Has something happened to him? Has he been harmed? And he doesn't care about himself. He's willing to sacrifice himself. Why was that? Because the Prophet ﷺ nurtured them upon that in the first 3 years, when that was a secret, that these people were ready to sacrifice anything. And then his mother, al-Khair, she sent to Jamil bint al-Khattab, who was Muslim at the time, but she was hiding her Islam. She came to her and she said that, what do you know about Muhammad alayhi salatu salam? And then Jamil, she didn't want to let Khair know that she's Muslim. So she said, I don't know anything about them. I don't know who you're talking about, she said. She didn't want them to know that she's Muslim. She was afraid that she's perhaps spying on behalf of Quraysh. And then she said that my son Abu Bakr, he wants to know the state of Muhammad. So then she said, let me come with you, I'll come see Abu Bakr. She came with her. She didn't want to give her information. She was afraid that she will convey that message to Quraysh about the Prophet ﷺ, his whereabouts and so on. So she came to Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr asked Jamil bint al-Khattab radiallahu anha, مَا فَعَلَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ? What happened to the Messenger of Allah? She said that he's okay, he's safe and sound, and he's in Dar al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Arqam. Abu Bakr, he said, I don't want to eat, I don't want to drink, I don't want to rest, I don't want any of that. I'm not going to do any of that until I see the Prophet ﷺ with my own hands, with my own eyes, sorry. Until I see him with my own eyes, I'm not going to rest. So then they said, no, you are, look at the state of you can't go anywhere. He forced them. And they took him to the Prophet ﷺ, Dar al-Arqam, Ibn Abi al-Arqam. He took his mother and Jamil bint al-Khattab. So the Prophet ﷺ saw the state of Abu Bakr. And the Prophet ﷺ became extremely upset when he saw his companion like that. And then Abu Bakr, he said, Bi Abi anta wa ummi ya Rasulullah. I ransom and I sacrifice my mother and my father for you, O Messenger of Allah. That nothing matters, yani. As long as you're alive, O Messenger of Allah, and you're safe, everything else doesn't matter. Every calamity is easy after knowing that you're safe. That's what Abu Bakr said. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua for my mother, that Allah guides her, and call her to Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ made dua for his mother, Khair, and he called her Islam, and she embraced Islam after that. Amongst those who were tortured by Quraish was the family of Yasir, the mother Sumayya bint al-Khayyat, and Yasir, and their son Ammar. That whole family, they were tortured by who? Abu Jahl, because they were freed slaves. They used to be slaves to Bani Makhzum, which is the clan of Abu Jahl. So Abu Jahl took it upon himself to torture them himself. He put them outside, and he tortured them day and night, hitting them, beating them, doing everything possible. And they would refuse to leave their religion. Yasir was tortured so much that he couldn't bear it anymore. Sumayya radiallahu anha, Abu Jahl came to her and said, insult Muhammad and believe in Allah al-Uzza. Insult these gods that you believe in, this God that you believe in. And Sumayya, she refused, and she spat at him and she insulted his gods. After she did that, Abu Jahl came and he stabbed her in her private parts with a spear, and he killed her, radiallahu anha, and she was the first martyr in Islam. Sumayya bint al-Khayyat, radiallahu anha. And then he came to Yasir, her husband, and they beat him so much that he died, and they killed him. Ammar, their son, he was witnessing his father and his mother killed in front of him. Right in front of them, they both had died. The Prophet ﷺ, prior to that, he saw them being tortured, and he came past them and he said to them, Sabran ya ala Yasir, fa inna maw'idakum al-jannah. Be patient on the family of Yasir, for verily your appointment, your place is in paradise. So that raised their morale. They were able to endure more because of that statement of the Prophet ﷺ, because of their iman that they had. That is what kept them going. And then Ammar radiallahu anhu ardah, they tortured him and tortured him until he radiallahu anhu ardah, he did what they asked him to do and insulted the Prophet ﷺ to save his life. And then he regretted that and he cried. And after that, when they let him go, he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I have disbelieved. He said, Ya Rasulullah, they forced me to do this and I did it. And the Prophet ﷺ remained quiet until Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala revealed an ayah where Allah Azza wa Jalla said, except the one, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. The one who is compelled to do something and he doesn't want to do it, but he does it. Whilst his heart is filled with faith and Iman, he's excused. Meaning that Ammar is excused and he has not disbelieved by doing so. Right? Now, that's Ali Yasir. Amongst those who were tortured in Mecca was Bilal ibn Rabah radiallahu anhu ardah. Bilal, he was a slave to a man known as Umayyah ibn Khalaf. When Umayyah found out about the Islam of Bilal, he tied a rope around the neck of Bilal radiallahu anhu, and then he got the children and the foolish people amongst Quraish to drag him around the streets of Mecca on the ground in the hot sun, to drag him around. And then he would place him outside in the hot sun, in the heat. He would place his back on the hot sand. And then he would whip him the whole day. And he would place a rock on his chest so Bilal could not get up. And Bilal radiallahu anhu would constantly respond when they would tell him, believe in Allah al-Uzza. He would say, Ahadun Ahad. One God. One Lord. And every time he would say that, Umayyah would get angry and start beating Bilal even more. And Bilal radiallahu anhu, when he narrates this incident, he said that when I saw the rage in his face every time I said Ahad, it motivated me to say it even more, to enrage him. Even though he's been beaten even more every time, he said Ahad. Look at the Iman. because they tasted the sweetness of Iman. They were able to enjoy that. For days, Bilal, it is said that Umayyah was torturing him for 7 days straight. A whole week, he was torturing him. And then when he gave up, he despaired that Bilal was going to leave this religion, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu came. And he came to Umayyah and he said to him that Umayyah, this slave, he's no use for you. Let me buy him. Sell him to me. So then he said, he's useless to me anyway. That's what Umayyah said. And he sold Bilal radiallahu anhu to Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu freed him. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did that with a number of people, not only Bilal. There's a number of slaves that he bought and he freed them who were from the Muslimin to protect them from their masters. You also have amongst those who tortured the Sahabi al-Jalil Khabbab ibn Arat radiallahu anhu arda. Khabbab ibn Arat radiallahu anhu arda. He was tortured by Quraish, and the way they tortured him was inhumane. They got hot coal, they burned the coal and they placed it on the ground. And then that hot coal that's on fire, they placed Khabbab radiallahu anhu's back on that coal so that his back would burn, and they placed a rock on his chest so he wouldn't be able to get up. Look at that. The Sahaba, what they endured for this religion. And that went on for a long period of time. Omar radiallahu anhu, he had a slave woman and she was a Muslimah. He radiallahu anhu, before he was Muslim, he used to beat her every day. And he would keep beating her. And then there would be times that he would stop. And then he would say to her that, know that I haven't stopped because I felt mercy for you. The only reason that I have stopped is because I have become tired. Don't think I'm feeling mercy for you. And then when I regain my energy, he carries on beating her up. And Umar radiallahu anhu, before his Islam, he was one of the arch enemies of Islam. And he tortured a lot of the Sahaba prior to Islam. Radiallahu anhu Allah. This was happening on the 4th year after Hijrah. After prophethood, sorry, not Hijrah, after prophethood. The 4th year after prophethood. And it continued throughout the 4th year to the 5th year after prophethood. But now when the 5th year came, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He permitted for the companions to migrate. And they migrated to Abyssinia, to Abu Lahab, which is the east of Africa today. And the Prophet ﷺ recommended that they go there because he said in those lands there is a just king, a just Christian king, An-Najashi. And Najashi, his name was Ashama. His actual name was Ashama. So An-Najashi, that was a title that was given to the kings of Abyssinia, but his name was Ashama. He was a just king, no one was oppressed in his lands. So the Prophet ﷺ directed the Sahaba to migrate there, to save them from the persecution of Quraish. So they migrated, a handful of them, a number of them migrated the first migration to Abyssinia. And this migration was led by Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. He led that group of Sahaba who migrated to Abyssinia. So when they migrated to Abyssinia, Quraish found out about them escaping. So they sent men after them. They sent Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah radiallahu anhu, both of them embraced Islam later on. They sent them to go bring back the companions to Mecca. And even if you leave the city, they won't let you go. Look how evil they were, Quraysh. So Amr ibn al-As was sent specifically because Amr, he was known as Dahiyatul Arab, the mastermind of the Arabs. He was extremely quick on his feet. He was the man they would come to when they needed to make plans and to plot, because he was very good at it. And he had also a good relationship with An-Najashi. So they sent him, hoping that he would be able to convince An-Najashi to send back the companions. So Amr ibn al-As and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah, they went to An-Najashi bearing gifts. And when they went to An-Najashi, they said to An-Najashi that after they gave him the gifts, Najashi asked them, what have you come for? They said that we have come to seek our people who have come to your lands, who have caused division and disunity amongst our people, and they have caused a lot of harm to our lands, we've come here to take them back for them to face justice. That's what he said. So, An-Najashi, he summoned the companions, and they were brought in front of him, whilst Amr and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'a were there. And An-Najashi, he asked them, what is it that these men are accusing you of? What's the truth regarding this? Because he was just, he listened to both sides of the story. He didn't listen just to Amr because he's his friend and say, you know what, I believe you, take them back. No. He gave the companions an opportunity to explain things to him. So Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, radiyallahu anhu Allah, he spoke on behalf of the companions. And he said, Ayyuha al-Malik, O King, we were people who lived in Jahiliyyah in the pre-Islamic times of ignorance. The strong one amongst us, the powerful one amongst us would oppress the weak. We would engage in fahisha and immorality. We would cut ties with kin. We would oppress women. We would cheat one another. We were bad neighbors. And then Allah Ta'ala sent to us Muhammad alayhi salatu salam, who called us to worship Allah alone and not to associate any partners with Him and not to worship idols. And He taught us to be good neighbors and to not oppress those who are weak and to keep ties with the kin. And He commanded us to establish the prayer and to give zakah. And He mentioned a number of commandments from Allah. And He mentioned a number of prohibitions. And He said that we came to you, O King, because our messenger told us that go to this king after we have faced all that persecution in Mecca from our own people who persecuted us and tortured us for our faith. Because he said that this king, no one is oppressed in his lands. So we came seeking your protection and your justice. So An-Najashi, after he had all that, he said, you may live in my lands as long as you wish. No one shall harm you, and no one shall ever ask you to leave these lands. So Sahaba, this was a victory for them and they left. So Amr ibn As and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'a, they were enraged by this. So Amr ibn As, he made a promise, he made an oath. He said to Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'a that I am going to do tomorrow something that's going to lead to their destruction and their death. Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'a, he said, Ya Amr, they are our relatives. Don't do that to them. Amr, he said, no, I'm going to do that. So he had a plan the next day. He came to An-Najashi and he said, Ya ayyuha al-Malik, innahum la yaquluna fi Isa qawlan azima. They say about Isa, because he's a Christian, right? An-Najashi. They say about Isa something great. They make claims about Isa ibn Maryam that you don't agree with. He wants to use his faith, the faith of An-Najashi, against the companions. So An-Najashi, he summoned the Sahaba again. And the Sahaba, they know why they are being summoned. They know that they're going to be asked about their faith regarding Isa, their belief regarding Isa. So they were scared. They were afraid of the reaction of An-Najashi. But they all agreed that they're going to tell the truth. So when An-Najashi, he asked them, what is it that you believe regarding Isa? Ja'far, radiallahu anhu, he said that we believe our Messenger alayhi taught us that he is Abdullah wa Rasuluhu وَكَلِمَتُهُ أَلْقَاهَا إِلَى مَرْيَمَ وَرُوحٌ مِّنْهُ. That he is a slave of Allah and his messenger. And his statement that he sent to Maryam alayhi salam, i.e. Allah said, Kun be, and it shall be, and he was in the womb of Maryam alayhi salam. And then An-Najashi, he said, what do you have from your Quran that will reveal to your messenger? So then Ja'far radiallahu anhu recited from Surah Maryam. These verses that talk about Maryam alayhi salam and also talk about Isa alayhi salam. So he recited these verses and Najashi is listening. Before I carry on, there's another car that needs to be removed. The registration is LN67WDS. So if that's your car, please remove it. طيب. So he heard these ayat from Surah Maryam. And bear in mind that An-Najashi, he's not an Arab. And he doesn't speak Arabic. this whole encounter that he's having with the companions at this time, it is done through an interpreter. He has a translator, right? He doesn't understand the actual Arabic. He doesn't understand the actual verses. But Najashi, when he heard these ayat of Surah Maryam, he started to cry. Until even his beard became moist, some of the narration they say. And even those who were around him, his priests and his ministers, they started to cry as well. And their scrolls became filled with their tears. And then he said after that, and Najashi said that, we believe regarding Isa the same as you believe. The priests around him, they started to make sounds, commotion, because of course they don't believe that. And then he said to the Sahaba, whoever harms you in my lands shall be fined. Whoever insults you shall be fined. And you may live in my lands as long as you live. And then he gave the gifts that Amr brought him back to him. And he said, take it back. I will not be bribed to be unjust and to oppress people. And he sent Amr and Abdullah ibn Abi Rabi'ah back to Mecca, and they were unsuccessful. And the companions were victorious then. They remained in Abyssinia for a period of time. Now, after that first migration to Abyssinia, in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ, the companions who were there with him in Mecca are still being persecuted by Quraish. And they're still being tortured. But during that time, there was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was one of the Hulafa of Quraish. He was not from Quraish. He had no one in Mecca who was protecting him. He was a shepherd. He was very weak. He didn't have wealth. He didn't have anything. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he decided one day that he said, I'm going to go out and recite the Quran publicly. So he went out to the Masjid al-Haram in front of the Kaaba, and he started reciting Surah Ar-Rahman from the beginning of it. Quraysh, they came around him because they heard the sound of him reciting Surah Ar-Rahman. And then as they heard it, they realized that this is Quran. They said, this is what Muhammad was calling to, alayhi salatu wasalam. So then they all started to beat him until he was extremely bruised. And he came back to the companions in Dawah Arqam, Ibn Abi Arqam. And they said to him, Ya Abdullah, what made you do this? Look at the courage of the Sahaba. And then he said that, I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. And then they told him, Hasbuk, that's enough. You've done enough. If they've heard what they dislike, that's enough. After that incident, the Prophet ﷺ, was revealed to him Surah Al-Najm. When he received Surah Al-Najm, the Prophet ﷺ recited it publicly amongst Quraysh. And Quraysh were all listening to this recitation because they all loved the Quran. They used to hide and listen to the Quran at night from the Prophet ﷺ, the disbelievers. So they loved it. So the Prophet ﷺ is reciting Surah Al-Najm, and the Sahaba are listening, Quraysh are listening, and at the end of the surah there's ayat of sujood tilawa. There's a prostration of recitation at the end of the verse. So the Prophet ﷺ, he did sujood tilawa when he recited the ayah, فَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ وَعْبُدُوا, prostrate to Allah and worship. He went to sujood. The Sahaba went to sujood, and all of the disbelievers of Quraysh also went to sujood. The Quran overpowered them. They all went to sujood. Every single one of them, not a single one of them was standing up. Every single one of the men who were standing there, who were listening, who were from the disbelievers of Quraysh, prostrated to Allah. And that was the power of the Quran, to the extent that a rumor spread that Mecca had embraced Islam because of that incident. And that rumor reached all the way to Abyssinia. A man who came from Ard al-Hijaz, from Arabia, who came to Abyssinia to trade, he spread that rumor in Abyssinia, and he reached the companions who migrated there. So some of them came back to Mecca, assuming that Mecca is Muslim at the time. And they came back and they found that that wasn't the case. So some of them were imprisoned by their families when they came back to Mecca, like Abdullah ibn Suhail ibn Amr. And others, when they heard, they sneaked back to Abyssinia, and now a bigger number of companions went back to them and joined them in the migration to Abyssinia. And this was known as the second migration to Abyssinia that also happened in the 5th year after prophethood. So now, the companions have migrated to Abyssinia. But those left in Mecca are still being tortured. Those who are not able to migrate are still being tortured by Quraysh. Quraysh now, what did they do? When they saw that the persecution of the companions wasn't working, they were getting extremely frustrated. So they wanted to start propaganda against the Prophet ﷺ. Mostly when the Hajj season was coming up, and this is the time that the Arabs are all coming to Mecca, and this is a great opportunity for the Prophet ﷺ to spread the da'wah to the rest of the Arabian Peninsula because they're all coming to Mecca. But Quraish, they saw that as a threat. So they wanted to have a plan before the Arabs come to Mecca to stop them, to stop the da'wah. So Al-Walid al-Mughira, he said to the rest of Quraysh that, you know the threat that we have from Muhammad ﷺ. So we need to be united in our stance regarding his da'wah when all the Arabs come to Mecca. We need to have one voice. We need to be saying the same thing. We can't be differing. So he said, what do you suggest that we say? They said to him, you're the most senior amongst us. You are our leader. Tell us what we should say. He said, no, you tell me and I'll tell you if it's a good idea or not. So they said, we'll say he's a kahin, he's a soothsayer. And then he said, no, I've had all the soothsayers and his speech is nothing like it. No one will believe you. And they said, okay, we'll say he is majnoon, he is sick, he's insane, he's lost his mind. And then he said that I've seen all the people who are insane and nobody's going to believe you that that's the case. Then they said that we'll say that he is a sorcerer, that this is magic. And then he said that I've seen all the different types of magic and this is nothing like it. And then they said that we'll say that he's a poet. And then he said that I know all the different types of poetry and this Quran is nothing like that poetry. And then he responded, Al-Walid, he said that this speech of the Quran is not poetry because إِنَّ لَهُ لَحَلَاوَةً وَإِنَّ عَلَيْهِ لَطَلَاوَةً وَإِنَّهُ يَعْلِي وَلَا يُعْلَى عَلَيْهِ. He said that this speech is sweet, the Quran. And it's eloquent and it's going to prevail, nothing will prevail over it. And they said to him, then what do we do then? You're just telling us that there's no plan, khalas. There's nothing we can, you're saying the Quran is going to prevail, it's sweet, it's eloquent, it's the most eloquent speech. What should we do? Then he went quiet for a while and he thought. And Allah mentions that in the Quran, إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ نَظَرَ ثُمَّ عَبَسَ وَبَصَرَ ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ وَاسْتَكْبَرَ فَقَالَ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرُ. He went quiet, he thought, deep thought, he looked, he found, he looked. And then he said, إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرُ. That this is magic. We're going to say that this is magic that affects people, that it causes a man and his wife to be disunited. It causes a father and his son to be divided. It causes brothers to be divided. It is magic that affects people like that. That's what we're going to tell people. So they agreed, that's what they're going to tell the people. The time of Hajj came, and this is a great opportunity for the Prophet ﷺ to go to Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ, the seasons that people gather, he would utilize it. And that's how the da'i, the one who's calling to Allah Ta'ala, he should be like we see now in the World Cup. It's an opportunity that the whole world is coming to a Muslim country, right? That's a Muslim, he sees that as a golden opportunity to go to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Perhaps people who never ever been exposed to Islam are going to hear about Islam. And that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. That the social media that he had today was Hajj, that day, that time. That's the only way he can get his message to reach the rest of the Arabian Peninsula, to all the different tribes and different cities and so on. So he ﷺ, he would go to Suq Uqab and he would go to the different people, he would call them to Islam, and you know who would follow him around? Abu Lahab. As he's calling people to Islam, his own uncle Abu Lahab will follow him around and he will say, لا تطيعوه, don't obey him. فإنه كذاب, he's a liar. And he would pelt the Prophet ﷺ with stones as he's calling them to Islam. Quraish, they told some of those who came to Mecca, some of the leaders who came to Mecca for Hajj, avoid him at all costs. They told him, put even earplugs in your ears. Don't listen to him. They told him that what he's going to say is sihr, magic that's going to affect you, is going to change you. So some of the people, they feared the Prophet ﷺ. So they put earplugs in their ears. And they avoided the Prophet ﷺ. But some of them, they said that, why should I listen to Quraish? I'm a man who is able to distinguish between what's true and what's false and to know what's right from wrong. Let me make my own mind up. Amongst them was a man who was Dumad al-Azdi. Dumad al-Azdi was from Yemen. He came to Mecca for Hajj. And he was a poet, and also he was a man who used to do ruqya, and the way the Arabs used to do ruqya in the past. So when he heard about the Prophet ﷺ, he told himself, you know what, forget me not listening to him, let me help Quraysh. Let me do ruqya on the Prophet ﷺ if he's insane, to heal him. So he went up to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Muhammad, I heard that you have been doing this, your da'wah. If there's something wrong with you, I do ruqya, let me heal you and treat you. So what do you think about that? You know, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, إِنَّ الْحَمْدَ لِلَّهِ نَحْمَدُهُ وَنَسْتَعِينُهُ وَنَسْتَغْفِرُهُ وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا وَمِنْ سَيِّئَاتِ أَعْمَالِنَا مَنْ يَهْدِهِ اللَّهُ فَلَا مُضِلَّ لَهُ وَمَنْ يُضْلِلْ فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ وَأَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمَّا بَعْدُ. He started with خطبة الحاجة, that he starts his sermons with. Demand, when he had that, now خطبة الحاجة is not Quran, right? It's a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. Demand, he had that, he said, أعد علي كلماتك هؤلاء. He said, repeat those statements for me again. So the Prophet ﷺ repeated the khutbah al-hajjah 3 times. And then after that, the demand, he said, that I have heard all the different statements of the Arabs. I've heard their poetry. And he said that this is nothing like it, this is different. He said this is going to have a great future, what you're calling people to. And you can't be an insane man. He said, give me your hand so that I can embrace Islam. And he pledged allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. He embraced Islam. After hearing the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, not Quran, imagine if he had Quran. Because Quran is the greatest speech, right? So the Imam al-Azdi radiallahu anhu embraced Islam like that because of just hearing khutbah al-hajjah. So Quraysh were failing miserably in every attempt to stop da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ, he was becoming more famous and his da'wah was becoming more famous and more people were hearing about him and embracing Islam. So Quraysh, they tried another approach. They said, you know what, this is not working. And amongst them is Umar ibn Khattab. Umar ibn Khattab at this time, he's not Muslim at the time. He decided that I have had enough. Umar, he had one night come out and he saw the Prophet ﷺ praying and reciting Quran. The Prophet ﷺ was reciting Surah Al-Haqqa. And as the Prophet ﷺ was reciting Surah Al-Haqqa, Umar radiallahu anhu, he started to listen. And he enjoyed this Quran. So then as he was listening, he said to himself, that this speech, it's not ordinary speech. It must be the statement of a poet. So the Prophet ﷺ recited, وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ شَاعِرٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تُؤْمِنُونَ. It's not the statement of a poet. Little do you believe. Now Umar radiallahu anhu, after he had that, and he said that it must be the statement of the soothsayer Kahin. And the Prophet ﷺ recited, وَلَا بِقَوْلِ كَاهِنٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. And it's not the statement of a soothsayer, little do you remember. And then Umar thought, then what is it then? Then he recited the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal. The Prophet ﷺ recited it, تَنزِيلٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. It is revelation from the Lord of the universe, Allah Jalla fi Ulah. And then he recited, وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْضَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ لَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُ بِالْيَمِينِ ثُمَّ لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينَ فَمَا مِنْكُمْ مِنْ أَحَدٍ عَنْهُ حَاجِزِينَ. That if the Prophet ﷺ was to fabricate this Quran, make it up, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, go grab him to the right, I will punish him, I will cut off his jugular vein, and nobody will be able to protect him from that. So Umar radiallahu anhu, after hearing this, he knows that this Quran is from Allah. But Umar, he had it and he was facing an internal battle at the time. Umar was very loyal to his people, Quraysh. And he hated disunity. He hated disunity. And he believed that this Islam is causing disunity amongst Quraysh. And he wanted them to all be united. So whilst Quraysh were in Dar Nadwa, and they were trying to figure out what to do with the Prophet ﷺ, Umar radiallahu anhu, he was thinking, I need to do something as an individual. So he came up with a plan that he is going to kill the Prophet ﷺ. Now, killing the Prophet ﷺ is going to cause a civil war amongst Quraysh. And that's why nobody has done it yet. Because Banu Hashim, they're going to find the rest of the clan. It's going to cause a civil war. And Omar is from Bani Adi, the clan of Bani Adi. So Omar, his plan was that he's going to kill the Prophet ﷺ, and then he's going to hand himself to Bani Hashim to kill him, a man for a man. He was ready to sacrifice himself for the unity of Quraysh. Look at that. So Umar radiallahu anhu went out, and he was heading towards the direction of the Prophet ﷺ with his sword. And then a man saw him, right? And he said that this man is from Bani Makhzum. He said that he's from Bani Zahra. He said that he's from Bani Adi. Regardless of who this man was, he saw Umar. He said, Ya Umar, where are you heading towards? And Umar said, I'm going to kill Muhammad. And then he said to him that, have you not heard that your own family have embraced Islam? Your sister, Fatima bint al-Khattab, and your brother-in-law, Sa'id ibn Zayd. So Umar, he didn't know that. So the man told him, go sort out your own household before looking elsewhere. So Umar turned around and he went to the house of his sister Fatima. And as he approached the door, he heard some sound coming out from that house, because they had with them Khabbab bin Arat radiallahu anhu, who was reciting Quran for them, teaching them Quran. So Umar, as he approached, they heard this sound and they heard him seeking permission to enter. Khabbab hid. And then Umar asked him, what's that sound that I heard before I entered? And then he said nothing. And he said, tell me. And then they said to him, nothing, Ya Umar. There was nothing that was happening. And then he said that I heard that you have left our religion. What's the truth regarding that? And then his sister said to him, that what about if the truth is in other than your religion? Ya Omar. Sa'id ibn Zayd said that to him, her husband. So Umar, when he heard that, he realized that they had left their religion and became Muslims. So he started to beat her husband, Sa'id. Started to beat him. So then Fatima, she's trying to stop Umar. And Umar is hitting him. And she can't stop him. He's enraged, he's angry. And then she said to him, Ya Umar, the truth is not in your religion. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And then he hit her. And she started to bleed. And when he saw his sister bleeding, Umar radiallahu anhu felt ashamed. And he stopped. And then he calmed down. And he asked them, let me see that which you're reading. Show me what you're reading. They said to him, you are impure, purify yourself first. So he went and purified himself, and then he started to read the Quran, Surah Taha. He recited from the beginning Surah Taha, Taha, ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa. He started from Basmala, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And he said, these are great, beautiful names. Taha, ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa, illa tadhkiratan liman yakhsha, tanzilan mimman khalaqa al-arda was-samawati al-ula. Ar-Rahman ala al-arshi istawa. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى. He recited these ayat. And then Umar radiallahu anhu, after he recited these verses, he said, what is more beautiful and greater and more noble than this speech? When he said that, Khabbab ibn Arat, who was hiding, he came out of hiding. And he said, Ya Umar, Arju, I hope that the dua of the Prophet ﷺ that he made for you Laylatul Khamis, Thursday night, that it's accepted. The Prophet ﷺ made a dua previously. He said, Oh Allah, Allahumma a'izz al-Islam bi ahabbi rajulayni ilayk, Amr ibn Hisham wa Umar ibn Khattab. He said, Oh Allah, grant might to Islam with the most beloved of these two men to you, Amr ibn Hisham, who is Abu Jahl, and Umar ibn Khattab. So he said, I hope that dua is accepted. So then Umar, he said, take me to the Prophet ﷺ. Khabbab took him to the Prophet ﷺ, Dar al-Arqam, and Umar has his sword, and he knocked on the door. Now prior to this, 3 days before Umar became Muslim, something happened in Mecca. Quraish, prior to this, they never used to harm the Prophet ﷺ. But Abu Jahl, he decided, I'm going to harm the Prophet ﷺ physically. So he physically assaulted the Prophet ﷺ. There was a slave woman who was a slave to Abu Lahab. She saw this and she reported it to the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. So Hamza had came back from hunting, and she told him not Abu Jahl had done to the Prophet ﷺ, how he insulted him and physically assaulted him. So then Hamza, who was not Muslim at the time, he rushed towards where Abu Jahl was and he hit Abu Jahl, he struck him. And he said, أَتَسُبُّ ibn أَخِي وَأَنَا عَلَى دِينِهِ? Are you insulting my nephew and I'm upon his religion? He wasn't upon his religion at the time, but he said it just to defend it out of tribalism. And then he hit him again. And then Bani Makhzum, they all got up. They're trying to defend Abu Jahl, his clan. And then all of Banu Hashim got up and they were going to fight. And then Abu Jahl told his people, stop, because I insulted his nephew, I deserve it. So then Hamza went to the Prophet after that and he truly embraced Islam. This is 3 days before Omar became Muslim. So now this granted great mind to the Muslims. So now Omar, he's coming to Dar al-Arqam. He knocks on the door, the Sahaba, they see from a hole, that's Omar. So they say to Omar. So the Hamza radiallahu anhu, he says, Wa Omar, so what if it's Omar? He said, if he's here for khair, we'll welcome him. If he's here for evil, we'll make sure he doesn't leave here alive. So Hamza radiallahu anhu opens the door and he grabs Omar by his collar, he drags him in and he said, Ya ibn al-Khattab, Oh Omar, are you not going to stop until Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala reveals Quran regarding just like he did to Walid al-Mughira? And Omar radiallahu anhu said, Allahumma. He said, yes, I'll stop. And then Hamza let go of him. And then Umar radiallahu anhu went to the Prophet ﷺ and he embraced Islam. And this is where Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He granted might to the Muslims with the Islam of Umar and Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib. Prior to the Islam of Umar and Hamza ibn Abdul Muttalib, Quraish did try to assault the Prophet ﷺ a number of times, physically assaulting. When the Prophet ﷺ was been praying by the Kaaba, Abu Jahl, he tried to assault him a number of times. He came and he said to Quraish, Ya Quraish, I am going to kill Muhammad. He grabbed the rock, a huge rock. He said, I'm going to smash on his head when he's in prayer. He said, Oh Quraish, when I do that, are you going to protect me from Bani Hashim or are you going to lead me to them? They said, we're going to protect you. So Abu Jahl, he set out and he saw the Prophet ﷺ praying and he got this rock and he was going to attack him. As he approached the Prophet ﷺ, he stopped and he went back to Quraish and they said to him, what happened? What happened to you? Why did you stop? And then he said that I saw a fire and I saw a huge beast that was going to, that was in Jibreel alayhi salam, the angels. They were protecting the Prophet alayhi salam. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if he took one more step, that they would have completely destroyed him and killed him. Allah Azza wa Jalla was protecting the Prophet alayhi salam. On another occasion, Abu Jahl said that who amongst you is going to harm the Prophet alayhi salam